Picture this. You're sitting at your childhood dining table, surrounded by family members who think they know your entire story, when suddenly everything you believed about your life gets flipped upside down in the span of 30 seconds. That's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago, and I'm still trying to process what came next. But before I tell you how a single dinner conversation led to the most shocking discovery of my life, and a revenge so sweet it still makes me smile, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt like the family disappointment, if you've ever sat at a table feeling invisible while everyone else got praised, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to share with you will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty, hidden secrets, and the power of patience. My name is Maya, and at 31, I thought I had figured out my place in the world. I was wrong. Dead wrong. It was a Sunday in late October, one of those crisp fall evenings where the leaves are just starting to turn and there's a hint of winter in the air. My stepmother, Linda, had insisted on hosting what she called a family appreciation dinner. Looking back now, I realize the irony in that name, but at the time, I was just grateful to be included. You see, I've always been the odd one out in my family. While my half-sister Brianna was getting her MBA from Northwestern and my half-brother Tyler was climbing the corporate ladder at his tech startup, I was the one who chose to become a middle school art teacher. Not exactly the career path that impresses at country club gatherings, if you know what I mean. I pulled into the circular driveway of my father's house in Westchester County, the same house I'd grown up in until my parents divorced when I was 12. The same house that never quite felt like home after Linda moved in with her perfect children and her perfect decorating taste. My beat-up Honda Civic looked pathetic next to Tyler's brand new Tesla and Brianna's Mercedes SUV. But I'd learned to swallow that particular humiliation years ago. Linda opened the door before I could even ring the bell, her smile as practiced and cold as ever. Maya, so glad you could make it, sweetheart. The way she said sweetheart always made my skin crawl, like she was talking to a stray dog she felt obligated to feed. Thanks for having me, Linda. I handed her the bottle of wine I'd brought, nothing fancy, just something from the grocery store that fit my teacher's salary budget. Oh, how thoughtful, she said, examining the label with barely concealed disdain. I'll just put this with the others. The others turned out to be a collection of wines that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Tyler had brought a bottle that looked like it belonged in a museum, and Brianna's contribution came with its own wooden presentation box. Dad was in the living room, and when he saw me, his face lit up in a way that reminded me why I still came to these things despite everything. There's my girl, he said, pulling me into one of his bear hugs that still made me feel like I was 8 years old again. Hey, Dad, you look good. And he did. At 58, my father was still the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. His hair had gone silver at the temples, but it just made him look distinguished, like a movie star playing a wealthy businessman. You know me, kiddo. Clean living and good genes. He winked, and for a moment, it was just us, the way it used to be before the divorce, before Linda, before everything got complicated. But the moment didn't last long. Tyler appeared, all 6'2" of him in his perfectly tailored suit, looking like he'd stepped out of a corporate recruiting brochure. Maya, good to see you, sis. Sis, right. We'd known each other for less than 20 years, and for most of that time, he'd barely acknowledged my existence unless Linda was watching. Tyler, how's the startup life treating you? Can't complain. We just closed our Series B funding round. $12 million. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather, but I caught the way his eyes flicked to Dad to make sure he was listening. That's amazing. Congratulations. Brianna joined us then, fresh from the powder room where she'd probably been checking her makeup. Everything about Brianna was precise, from her perfectly blown-out blonde hair to her designer dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Maya, you look comfortable. She air-kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume. I was wearing a simple black dress from Target and my grandmother's pearl earrings, nothing wrong with the outfit, but standing next to Brianna always made me feel like I was playing dress-up in adult clothes. We made small talk while Linda put the finishing touches on dinner, and I tried to ignore the familiar knot in my stomach that always formed during these family gatherings. It wasn't that they were openly cruel to me. It was more subtle than that. The way conversations would pause when I tried to contribute, the way my accomplishments were acknowledged with polite but distant smiles, while Tyler and Brianna's successes were celebrated like national holidays. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, the one with the crystal chandelier and the china that cost more than my car. Linda had outdone herself with the presentation: prime rib, roasted vegetables that looked like they belonged in a magazine, wine flowing like water. The conversation started innocently enough. Dad asked about my teaching, and I told him about the mural project my seventh graders were working on for the school's main hallway. I watched his face light up with genuine interest, and for a moment, I remembered why I loved him so much. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. You always did have such a creative spirit. It really is fulfilling work, I said, feeling a warm glow at his approval. Yesterday, one of my students who's usually pretty shy presented her piece to the whole class, and you could just see her confidence growing with every word. Moments like that are why I teach. How nice, Linda said, cutting her meat with surgical precision. It must be so rewarding to work with children, even if the pay isn't much to speak of. There it was. Linda had a gift for delivering insults wrapped in compliments, and she'd just demonstrated it perfectly. The comment hung in the air like smoke, and I felt my cheeks flush. The pay isn't everything, I said carefully. I love what I do. Of course you do, dear. Not everyone can be motivated by money. She smiled at me, the same smile a shark might give a seal. Tyler jumped in, probably sensing the tension. Speaking of money, Dad, I wanted to run something by you. We're looking at expanding into the European market, and I could use some advice on the financial structuring. And just like that, the conversation shifted away from me and onto Tyler's business ventures. I watched Dad's face transform as he leaned forward, engaging with Tyler in a way he never quite managed when I talked about my students or my art. This was the pattern, the same dance we'd been doing for years. I'd share something from my life, get a moment of Dad's attention, and then one of Linda's children would swoop in with something more impressive, more worthy of the family's focus. But this time felt different. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe I'd just reached my breaking point, but I found myself studying the dynamics at the table with new eyes. The way Linda's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. The way Tyler and Brianna seemed to perform their successes, rather than simply share them. The way Dad's attention shifted so easily away from me and toward his stepchildren. I was lost in these thoughts when Brianna's voice cut through my reverie like a knife. Oh my God, Maya, are you still wearing that old Timex? She was staring at my wrist with a look of genuine horror, as if I were wearing a dead animal. I looked down at my watch, a simple silver piece with a leather band that I'd owned for probably 10 years. It wasn't anything special, just reliable and functional, which was exactly what I needed. It still tells time, I said with a shrug, trying to keep my voice light. Barely, Tyler laughed. Maya, you're 31 years old. Don't you think it's time to invest in a real watch? This is a real watch. It works perfectly fine. I mean a real watch, Brianna said, rolling her eyes. She held up her wrist, showing off what looked like a small diamond mine attached to a gold band. This is a real watch. Cartier. Tyler gave it to me for my birthday. It's beautiful, I said, and I meant it. It was also probably worth more than my annual salary. You know what your problem is, Maya? Tyler was warming up to his topic now, his voice taking on the condescending tone he used when he thought he was teaching me something important. You don't understand the importance of presentation. Image matters in the adult world. People judge you by how you present yourself. I'm not trying to impress anyone with my watch. Maybe that's the problem, Linda chimed in smoothly. Dear, I know teaching is important to you, but you're not getting any younger. Don't you think it might be time to consider a more substantial career? Something with better prospects. The knot in my stomach tightened. I love teaching, Linda. I'm good at it and it makes a difference in kids' lives. I'm sure it does, she said in that tone that meant the exact opposite. But surely you don't want to be struggling financially for the rest of your life. Look at Tyler and Brianna. They're both doing so well for themselves. And there it was, the comparison I'd been dreading all evening. Tyler and Brianna, the golden children, held up as examples of what success looked like. while I sat there in my Target dress and my old watch, representing everything the family found disappointing. "I'm not struggling," I said quietly. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded, because the truth was I was struggling. Not desperately, but enough that I had to think twice before buying groceries, enough that a car repair could throw off my budget for months. "Of course not, sweetheart," Dad said quickly, shooting a warning look at Linda. But the damage was done. The words hung in the air between us, and I could feel my cheeks burning with embarrassment. "You know what?" Brianna said suddenly, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. "We should all chip in and buy Maya a real watch, like a family gift, something to help her look more professional." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. They were talking about me like I wasn't even there, like I was some charity case that needed their help to function in the real world. "That's not necessary," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, but it would be fun." Linda had picked up on Brianna's idea and was running with it. "We could all go shopping together, make it a little family outing. Find you something appropriate for your age and circumstances." I looked around the table at these people who shared my blood, or at least my father's name, and felt more alone than I had in years. This wasn't love or concern. This was pity, dressed up in pretty words and expensive intentions. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an explosive, dramatic way, but quietly, like a rubber band that's been stretched too far for too long. I was tired of being the family disappointment, tired of apologizing for choosing a career I loved over one that paid better, tired of sitting at this table and feeling like I was somehow less than because I measured success differently than they did. But instead of storming out like every fiber of my being wanted to do, I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. A real smile, not one of those polite, strained expressions I usually wore at family gatherings. "You know what? You're absolutely right. This watch is pretty dated." I held up my wrist, letting the light catch the simple silver face. "I should probably upgrade to something more appropriate." The relief around the table was palpable. Linda beamed like she just solved world hunger, and Tyler nodded approvingly, as if I'd finally shown some sense. "Wonderful." Linda clapped her hands together. "We'll make a day of it. Maybe next weekend." "Actually," I said, still smiling, "I might have something in mind already. But thank you for the offer." "Really?" That's when Dad spoke up for the first time since the watch conversation started. His voice was careful, like he was trying to smooth over the awkwardness that had settled over the table like a fog. "Maya doesn't need us to buy her anything. She's perfectly capable of making her own decisions about what she wants to wear." I felt a surge of gratitude toward him, mixed with the familiar ache of wanting his approval so desperately. But then I caught something in his expression, a flicker of something that looked almost like curiosity. He was looking at my wrist with an intensity that seemed odd for such a mundane conversation. "Dad, everything okay?" He blinked, as if coming back from somewhere far away. "Of course, kiddo. That's an interesting watch. Where did you get it?" "This old thing." I looked down at it again, confused by his sudden interest. "I've had it forever. I think I bought it at a department store years ago." "Why?" But Dad didn't answer. He was staring at my wrist with an expression I couldn't read, his face pale in the chandelier light. The conversation continued around us, but I could feel the weight of his gaze, the strange tension that had suddenly entered the room. I had no idea that in about 30 seconds, everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change forever. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and clinking silverware, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in the room. Dad kept glancing at my watch when he thought I wasn't looking, his expression troubled in a way that made my stomach churn with a new kind of anxiety. When Linda served dessert, some elaborate chocolate creation that probably took hours to make, I excused myself to the bathroom, partly because I needed a moment to collect myself, and partly because I wanted to escape the suffocating atmosphere of fake concern and thinly veiled criticism. But as I was walking down the hallway, I heard Dad's voice from the kitchen, low and urgent. He was talking to Linda, and something in his tone made me stop just outside the doorway. Where did she get that watch, Linda? What watch? That old thing Maya's wearing? How should I know? Some discount store, probably. Linda's voice carried her usual dismissive tone, but there was something else there too, something sharp and defensive. Linda, Dad's voice was different now, harder than I'd heard it in years. I need you to tell me the truth. Where did Maya get that watch? The silence stretched so long, I thought they might have left the kitchen. Then Linda spoke again, and her voice was small, almost frightened. David, I can explain. Explain what? How my daughter is wearing a watch that was supposed to be locked in our safe. A watch that you told me was stolen 2 years ago. My blood turned to ice in my veins. I pressed myself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe, as the conversation continued. You called the police, Linda. You filed a report. You told me someone had broken in and taken your jewelry, including that watch. I held you while you cried about how violated you felt, how unsafe you were in our own home. David, please let me explain. Did you give her that watch, Linda? Did you give Maya the watch you claimed was stolen? The silence was answer enough. I could hear my father's breathing, heavy and controlled, like he was trying not to explode. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. How long? David, how long has my daughter been wearing the watch you threw away like garbage? The watch you told me was worthless costume jewelry when you reported it stolen. Threw away like garbage. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked down at my wrist, at the simple silver watch that had been my faithful companion for years, and suddenly everything made terrible sense. I remembered now, vaguely, how I'd found it. I'd been visiting Dad one weekend about 10 years ago, back when I was still in college. I'd taken out the trash for Linda as a favor, and there it was, sitting on top of the garbage bag like someone had just tossed it aside. The leather band had been scuffed, and the face was a little scratched, but it kept perfect time. I'd asked Linda if it was okay for me to keep it, and she'd waved me off with barely a glance. It's just an old thing that doesn't work properly, she'd said. Take it if you want it, dear. Save yourself from having to buy one. But now, hearing Dad's voice, raw with betrayal and confusion, I realized that Linda had lied. About everything. She's had it for 10 years, David. Maybe more. I didn't think. I mean, you never really looked at what she was wearing before. Before what, Linda? Before tonight? Before I finally paid enough attention to my own daughter to notice she was wearing something that belonged to her. Belonged to her. The words echoed in my head like church bells. What did that mean? You don't understand, Linda was saying, and now she sounded desperate. I was trying to protect her. Protect all of us. That watch. David, you know what that watch represents. What it would mean if she knew. What it represents. Dad's voice rose slightly, then dropped back to that dangerous whisper. It represents her inheritance, Linda. It represents the memory of her mother. It represents everything I should have given her years ago, but didn't because I trusted you when you said it had been stolen. My mother. My breath caught in my throat, and I had to grip the wall to keep from falling. My mother had been dead for 15 years, and I barely remembered her. Dad never talked about her, said it was too painful, and I'd grown up with only a few faded photographs and the vague memory of someone who smelled like vanilla and sang lullabies in a soft, sweet voice. Maya doesn't need to know about any of this, Linda said urgently. What good would it do? She's happy with her simple life, her teaching job. Why complicate things? Complicate things? I could hear Dad moving around the kitchen, probably pacing the way he did when he was furious. Linda, that watch isn't just some family heirloom. Do you have any idea what it's worth? Of course I know what it's worth, Linda snapped, and suddenly her mask was completely off. Gone was the concerned stepmother, the gracious hostess. What was left was something cold and calculating. Why do you think I got rid of it in the first place? That little brat was never supposed to find it. Never supposed to wear it around like some trinket. Do you know how many times I've sat at dinner tables and charity events, watching her wave that thing around, knowing that if anyone who understands jewelry got a good look at it, our whole life would fall apart? Our whole life. Not my life, not Dad's life. Our life. Linda's life. Fall apart how? Dad's voice was deadly calm now. Because then people would ask questions, David. They'd want to know how a middle school teacher afforded a watch like that. They'd want to know where it came from, who gave it to her. And then what? What would we tell them? That her mother left her a piece of jewelry worth more than most people's houses? That you've been sitting on a fortune that rightfully belongs to your daughter, while I've been... She trailed off, but the damage was done. While you've been what, Linda? The silence stretched so long, I thought one of them had left the room. Then Linda's voice came again, smaller now, defeated. While I've been living in fear that someday she'd find out the truth. About the watch, about the other things, about what her mother really left her. David, you don't understand what it's been like watching her struggle with her teacher's salary, knowing that she could buy and sell this entire house with what's rightfully hers, and not being able to say anything because I was the one who threw it all away. Threw it all away. Other things. What her mother really left her. I was shaking now, my entire body trembling as the full scope of what I was hearing began to sink in. This wasn't just about a watch. This was about my entire life, my entire understanding of who I was and where I came from. How much, Linda? Dad's voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. How much what? How much is my daughter's inheritance actually worth? And don't lie to me this time, because I swear to God, if you've been lying to me about this for 15 years. David, please. How much? Another endless silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. $47 million. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling, my knees suddenly unable to support my weight. $47 million. The number was so large it didn't seem real, like a figure from a movie or a dream. 47 million, Dad repeated, his voice hollow with shock. And you told me her mother left her nothing. You told me Sarah died broke, that all her money was tied up in debts and legal troubles. She did die in debt, Linda said quickly. But the assets, David, Sarah's family was old money, real old money. The kind that gets passed down through trusts and foundations and things that don't show up in probate court. The watch was just the tip of the iceberg. When Maya turns 35, she inherits everything. The house in Martha's Vineyard, the art collection, the stock portfolio, the trust fund, everything. 35. I was 31. In 4 years, I was supposed to inherit $47 million, and I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, worrying about whether I could afford to fix my car, while my stepmother knew the entire time that I was secretly wealthy. And you decided this was information I didn't need to have? I was protecting our family. Linda's voice rose to nearly a shout. David, think about what this would mean. Maya would leave teaching, probably leave the state. She'd have enough money to do whatever she wanted, go wherever she wanted. We'd lose her completely. We don't have her now, Dad said quietly. We've never had her, thanks to you. Look at tonight, Linda. Look at how we treated her, how we talked about her. We made her feel like a charity case while she was wearing a watch worth more than Tyler's entire startup company. Worth more than Tyler's startup company. I thought about Tyler bragging about his $12 million funding round, thought about how impressed Dad had been, and I nearly laughed out loud at the absurdity of it all. It was for the best, Linda insisted, but her voice lacked conviction now. Maya is happy with her simple life. She loves teaching, she's good at it. Money would just complicate things for her. That wasn't your decision to make, wasn't it? David, you checked out after Sarah died. You were so wrapped up in your grief that you couldn't even look at Maya without falling apart. Someone had to make the hard choices. Someone had to protect this family. So yes, I made the decision. I told the lawyers that Maya had died with her mother. I had all of Sarah's assets transferred to a trust that Maya would never know existed. I saved our family from being torn apart by money and guilt and the past. Told the lawyers that I had died with my mother. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Linda had erased me from my own inheritance as easily as erasing a mistake from a chalkboard. You destroyed the documents, Dad said, and it wasn't a question. I destroyed some documents, the ones that would have made things complicated. You stole from her. You stole from my daughter. I protected her. Linda's voice cracked with desperation. David, you don't know what money like that does to people. I've seen it in my own family. It ruins relationships, destroys trust, turns people into monsters. Maya is good. She's pure. She's everything that's right in the world. I couldn't let that money corrupt her. So instead you decided to let her struggle. You decided to let her feel inferior to your children. You decided to let her think she wasn't good enough for this family. The pain in Dad's voice was almost unbearable to hear, but it was nothing compared to the rage that was building in my chest. Linda hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen my sense of self-worth, my confidence, my place in the family. She'd made me feel like the poor relation, the disappointment, the one who couldn't quite measure up, all while knowing that I was wealthier than the rest of them combined. I thought about every family dinner where I'd felt inadequate, every time I'd apologized for my career choice, every time I'd watched Tyler and Brianna get praise for their success, while I sat there feeling invisible. Linda had orchestrated all of it, had created a lie so complete that even Dad had believed it. But here's the thing about revenge. It tastes sweetest when it's been seasoned with years of humiliation. And as I stood there in that hallway, listening to my stepmother's pathetic justifications, I realized that I had been handed the perfect opportunity to serve Linda exactly what she deserved. If you've ever discovered that someone you trusted has been lying to you for years, manipulating your entire life while pretending to care about your well-being, you know the feeling that was washing over me. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. Crystal clear, diamond-sharp understanding of exactly what needed to happen next. I straightened my shoulders, smoothed down my target dress, and walked back into that dining room with my chin held high and my grandmother's watch. No, my mother's watch, gleaming silver on my wrist. It was time for Linda to learn that the family disappointment was about to become her worst nightmare. I walked back into the dining room on legs that felt like they were made of lead, my mind spinning with everything I'd just heard. Tyler and Brianna were still at the table, Tyler scrolling through his phone while Brianna touched up her lipstick in a compact mirror. They looked up when I entered, their expressions politely curious. "Everything okay?" Brianna asked, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care about the answer. "Perfect," I said, and I meant it in a way that neither of them could possibly understand. I sat back down at my place, acutely aware of the weight of the watch on my wrist. $47 million. The number kept circling through my head like a mantra. Dad and Linda came back from the kitchen a few minutes later, both of them looking like they'd aged 10 years in the span of our conversation. Dad's face was carefully composed, but I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. Linda, on the other hand, looked like she was about to be sick. "Good. Sorry about that," Dad said, settling back into his chair. "Just some household business to discuss." Linda sat down without meeting my eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her wine glass. I watched her with new understanding, seeing her not as the confident stepmother who'd made my life difficult, but as a woman who'd been living with a massive lie for over a decade. "So," I said brightly as if nothing had changed, "what were we talking about?" "Oh, right. My watch." I held up my wrist, letting the light catch the silver face. "You know, now that you mention it, I have been thinking about getting something new." Tyler perked up. "Really? I know a great place downtown. They specialize in luxury timepieces. I could introduce you to my guy there." "That's so thoughtful of you," I said, keeping my voice warm and grateful. "But actually, I think I might have this one appraised first. Just out of curiosity, you know. I've had it so long, I've never really looked into what it might be worth." I watched Linda's face go completely white. She gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Oh, I wouldn't bother," she said quickly. "It's just costume jewelry, dear. Probably not worth the appraisal fee." "Maybe," I said thoughtfully. "But you'd be surprised what some old watches are worth these days." I was reading an article online about vintage timepieces selling for incredible amounts at auction. Some woman in Connecticut found out her grandmother's watch was worth $500,000. Dad was staring at me now, his expression unreadable. I could tell he was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I'd overheard. The answer was everything, but I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. $500,000? Brianna laughed. "For a watch? That's insane, right? Makes you wonder what other treasures are just sitting around, unnoticed." I took a sip of my wine, savoring the moment. "Linda, You've always had such great taste in jewelry. You must know something about watches. What do you think? Think this old thing might surprise me? Linda's laugh came out as more of a croak. Oh, sweetheart, I really don't think. I mean, it's just a simple watch. Nothing special about it. Nothing special, I repeated slowly. That's funny, because Dad seemed pretty interested in it earlier. Didn't you, Dad? All eyes turned to my father, who was sitting very still, like a man who just realized he was standing in a minefield. When he spoke, his voice was carefully measured. It's an interesting piece. Classic design. Sometimes the simple ones are more valuable than the flashy ones. Exactly, I said, clapping my hands together in mock delight. That's what I'm hoping. Wouldn't it be amazing if it turned out to be worth something substantial? I could finally stop worrying about my budget, maybe even quit teaching and do something more ambitious. You love teaching, Tyler said, confused by the direction of the conversation. I do love teaching, I agreed. But let's be honest, the money isn't great. And as Linda pointed out earlier, I'm not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to think about my financial future more seriously. I could see Linda struggling to find words, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This was delicious. Maya, Dad said carefully, can I ask you something? Of course. Where exactly did you get that watch? Here it was, the moment of truth, or at least the first layer of it. I looked around the table, making eye contact with each of them, saving Linda for last. It's funny you ask, I said slowly. I got it from the garbage. Brianna nearly choked on her wine. The garbage. Yep. Right here, actually. It was about 10 years ago when I was still in college. I was visiting for the weekend, and Linda asked me to take out the trash. This watch was sitting right on top of one of the bags, like someone had just thrown it away. I turned to Linda, whose face had gone from white to green. I asked you about it, remember? You said it was just an old thing that didn't work properly, and that I could keep it if I wanted it. I don't really remember. Linda whispered. Oh, I remember it perfectly. You were so dismissive about it, like it was just junk. Save yourself from having to buy one, you said. Such good advice, as it turned out. Tyler and Brianna were looking back and forth between Linda and me, sensing undercurrents they didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Wait, Brianna said slowly. Linda, didn't you report some jewelry stolen a few years ago? I remember you being really upset about it. That was different jewelry, Linda said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. Was it? I asked innocently, because that would be such a coincidence, wouldn't it? You throwing away an old watch one year, then having jewelry stolen a few years later. Almost like, well, never mind. I'm probably just overthinking things. Dad was watching this exchange with the fascination of a man watching a chess master execute a particularly elegant checkmate. I could see him starting to understand what I was doing, and something that might have been pride flickered across his face. You know what? I said, standing up and smoothing down my dress. I think I will get this appraised. First thing Monday morning. Won't that be exciting? Linda made a sound that might have been a whimper. And if it does turn out to be valuable, I continued, I'll have to start asking some harder questions. Like where it really came from and how it ended up in the trash. Because that would be such an interesting story, wouldn't it? The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler and Brianna were staring at Linda like they were seeing her for the first time, which, in a way, they were. Dad was still watching me with that unreadable expression, probably trying to figure out how much damage I was planning to do. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Actually, I said, as if a thought had just occurred to me, Linda, you must have some information about my mother that would help with the appraisal. You know, provenance and all that. Didn't you help Dad go through her things after she died? If Linda had looked sick before, now she looked like she was about to faint. Maya, your mother didn't have much. We went through everything, and there really wasn't anything of value. I tapped my finger against my lip, pretending to think. That's strange, because I've been doing some research lately. About Mom's family. The Weatherbys were old Boston money, weren't they? Going back generations. Seems odd that she wouldn't have left me anything at all. The name hit Linda like a physical blow. She actually swayed in her chair, and Tyler had to reach out to steady her. "Mom, are you okay?" Brianna's voice was sharp with concern. "I'm fine," Linda managed, but she wasn't fine. She was coming apart at the seams, and I was just getting started. "The Weatherbys," I continued conversationally, "apparently own quite a bit of property. Houses, art collections, investment portfolios, all passed down through the family for generations. It's fascinating, really, what you can find when you start digging into genealogy records." Dad leaned forward slightly. "Maya, where are you getting this information?" "Oh, here and there. The internet is amazing these days. Public records, estate filings, newspaper archives. You can find out almost anything if you know where to look." I smiled sweetly at Linda. "I've been particularly interested in trust documents and inheritance records. Amazing what gets filed away in courthouse basements." This was mostly a bluff. I hadn't actually done any research yet. But Linda didn't know that. She was staring at me like I'd just pulled out a loaded gun. "There's something I've been wondering about," I said, settling back into my chair like we were just having a casual family conversation. When someone dies and leaves behind a substantial estate, there are usually quite a few legal documents involved. Wills, trust agreements, asset transfers. All that paperwork has to go somewhere, right? "Maya," Dad said quietly, and there was a warning in his voice that I chose to ignore. "I mean, just imagine if someone tried to hide that kind of documentation, or destroy it. That would be fraud, wouldn't it? Maybe even criminal fraud, depending on the amounts involved." I looked directly at Linda. "What do you think, Linda? You worked in estate planning before you married Dad. You know about these things." Tyler and Brianna were looking increasingly uncomfortable. They could sense that something major was happening, but they didn't understand what, and that was making them nervous. "Maybe we should change the subject," Tyler suggested. "Oh, but this is so interesting," I said brightly. "I'm learning so much about my family history. Did you know, for instance, that when someone inherits money through a trust, there are usually very specific conditions, like age requirements or milestone dates?" Linda's breathing was becoming shallow and rapid. She looked like she might hyperventilate. "And here's the really fascinating part," I continued, my voice still light and conversational despite the nuclear bomb I was about to drop. "Some trusts are structured so that if the beneficiary doesn't claim their inheritance by a certain date, the money goes to, well, to whoever was managing the trust, like a consolation prize for all their hard work." The silence was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking 3 rooms away. "Maya," Dad said, and now his voice was sharp with understanding, "how much do you know?" I looked around the table one more time, at Tyler and Brianna's confused faces, at Dad's growing comprehension, at Linda's absolute terror. Then I smiled, not the polite, strained smile I'd been wearing all evening, but a real smile, full of satisfaction and barely contained fury. "I know everything, Dad. Every single thing." Linda made a sound like a wounded animal and pushed back from the table, so hard her chair nearly toppled over. She was on her feet, backing away from us like we were dangerous. I need to." She couldn't finish the sentence. She just stood there, shaking, looking like her entire world was crashing down around her. Which, to be fair, it was. "Sit down, Linda," Dad said, and his voice had gone cold as winter. "We're going to finish this conversation." But Linda wasn't listening. She was staring at me with something that looked like horror mixed with a twisted kind of respect. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "About 20 minutes, I said cheerfully. "I heard you and Dad talking in the kitchen. Thank you for that, by the way. Very illuminating." Tyler finally found his voice. "Will someone please tell me what the hell is going on?" I looked at him, this man who'd spent the evening condescending to me about my career choices and my old watch, and I felt a surge of pure, righteous satisfaction. "What's going on, Tyler, is that your mother has been lying to all of us for over a decade. She's been stealing from me, manipulating Dad, and playing puppet master with our entire family. And now," I stood up, smoothing down my target dress one more time, "now she's going to tell you exactly what she's done, and then we're going to decide what to do about it." I walked over to where Linda was standing, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, and I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me. $47 million, Linda. That's what you stole from me. That's what you've been hiding while watching me struggle to pay my rent. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you get away with it, you're even more delusional than I thought. When I stepped back, Linda's face was streaked with tears, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This woman had spent years making me feel small, inadequate, unworthy of my own family's respect. She'd robbed me of more than money. She'd robbed me of my sense of self-worth, my confidence, my place in the world. But that was about to change. If you've ever wanted to see someone who's hurt you face consequences for their actions, you understand the feeling that was washing over me. It wasn't just about the money, though $47 million certainly made things more interesting. It was about justice. It was about truth. It was about finally getting to watch Linda's house of lies come crashing down around her ears. Now, I said, settling back into my chair and folding my hands in my lap like we were about to discuss the weather. Let's talk about what happens next. Linda collapsed back into her chair like someone had cut her strings. The transformation was startling. Gone was the polished, confident woman who'd been hosting this dinner party, replaced by someone who looked fragile and desperate. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered 10 years of condescending comments, 10 years of feeling like the family failure, 10 years of struggling financially while she knew I was secretly wealthier than all of them combined, and that moment of sympathy evaporated like morning mist. Mom, what is Maya talking about? Brianna's voice was high and strained, like a violin string pulled too tight. What $47 million? Dad leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Linda, tell them. All of it. From the beginning. I can't, Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't do this. You don't have a choice, I said quietly. Because here's what's going to happen if you don't. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling a lawyer. By tomorrow afternoon, I'm filing papers to have everything you've hidden investigated by people who know how to dig much deeper than I do. By tomorrow evening, this story is going to be all over town because, trust me, wealthy families stealing from their own children makes for very juicy gossip. Linda flinched like I'd slapped her. But, I continued, leaning forward slightly, if you tell the truth right now, if you come clean about everything you've done, maybe we can handle this privately. As a family. It was a lie, of course. I had no intention of handling this privately. But Linda didn't need to know that yet. Tyler was looking back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match. Somebody needs to start making sense. Now, Dad took a deep breath. Your mother told Maya's biological mother left her nothing when she died. She told me that Sarah died broke, in debt, with no assets to speak of. She told me that Maya would have to make her own way in the world because there was no family money to help her. That's true, Tyler said, confusion clear in his voice. Right? I mean, Maya's always struggled financially. Maya's always struggled financially, Dad said slowly, because her stepmother threw away her inheritance and then reported it stolen to cover her tracks. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched understanding dawn on Tyler's face, followed quickly by something that looked like horror. The watch, Brianna breathed. Maya's wearing the watch she said was stolen. Among other things, I said grimly. Tell them, Linda. Tell them about the trust fund. Tell them about the property in Martha's Vineyard, the art collection, the stock portfolio. Tell them about the $47 million that's supposed to be mine when I turn 35. Linda was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I was trying to protect everyone, she managed between gasps. You don't understand what money like that does to people. It destroys families. No, Dad said, his voice cutting through her sobs like a blade. You destroyed our family. You made my daughter feel like she wasn't good enough, like she didn't belong, while you knew the entire time that she was wealthier than any of us. Tyler pushed back from the table, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. This is insane. This can't be real. Oh, it's real, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Your mother has been playing the long game for over a decade, and she almost got away with it. For more years, and my inheritance would have defaulted to whoever was managing the trust. Care to guess who that would have been? Tyler stared at his mother with growing comprehension. You. It would have gone to you. Linda didn't deny it. She couldn't. So let me see if I have this straight, Brianna said, her voice shaking with anger. You've been stealing from Maya for years, making her feel inferior to us, while planning to eventually steal $47 million that belongs to her? I was protecting her. Linda screamed, suddenly finding her voice. Do you have any idea what that kind of money would have done to her? She would have left teaching, left all of us, gone off to live some ridiculous wealthy lifestyle. We would have lost her completely. We never had her to begin with, Dad said quietly. Because of you. I stood up again, pacing to the window that overlooked Linda's perfectly manicured garden. Everything about this house was a lie, I realized. The expensive furniture, the luxury cars in the driveway, the country club memberships, all of it built on stolen money that should have been mine. You want to know the really sick part? I said, not turning around. I wouldn't have left. If you had told me the truth from the beginning, if you had been honest about what my mother left me, I probably would have put most of it in a foundation or donated it to schools. I love teaching. I love my simple life. The money wouldn't have changed who I was. I turned back to face them, but the lying did. The manipulation did. The years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I was somehow less than Tyler and Brianna, because I chose a career I loved over one that paid well. That changed me. That hardened something inside me that didn't need to be hard. Linda was staring at me with something that might have been regret, but it was too little, too late. Maya, she whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. You never meant to get caught, I corrected. There's a difference. Tyler was still processing everything, his businessman's mind probably running calculations. $47 million, he said slowly. Jesus, Maya. That's more than my company is worth. That's more than all of our assets combined. I know, I said simply. And in 4 years, when I turn 35, it all becomes legally mine, whether Linda likes it or not. What are you going to do? Brianna asked, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Not pity, not condescension, but something that might have been respect. I looked around the table at these people who shared my father's name, but had never really been my family. Linda, trembling and defeated. Tyler and Brianna, shocked and trying to process the magnitude of what their mother had done. Dad, looking older than I'd ever seen him, probably wondering how he'd been so blind for so long. I'm going to do what I should have done years ago, I said finally. I'm going to stop letting other people decide what's best for me. I'm going to stop apologizing for who I am and what I've chosen. And I'm going to make sure that everyone who's been lying to me faces consequences for their actions. I walked back to my chair and picked up my purse, a simple black bag that had seen better days. Funny how everything about my life was about to change. But for now, I was still the same person I'd been when I walked in here tonight. But first, I said, slinging the purse over my shoulder, I'm going to go home and research some lawyers who specialize in estate fraud. It's going to be a busy week. Linda looked up at me with desperate eyes. Maya, please, can't we work this out as a family? I stared down at her for a long moment. This woman who had stolen years of my life along with my money, who had made me feel small and insignificant while living off what should have been mine. Linda, I said quietly, we were never family. You made sure of that. I started toward the door, then paused and looked back at Dad. I'll call you tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about. He nodded, his face pale but determined. Maya, I want you to know that I had no idea. I know, Dad. We'll figure it out. I was almost to the front door when I heard footsteps behind me. Tyler appeared in the hallway, looking shell-shocked, but somehow different than he had an hour ago. Maya, wait. I turned, one hand on the doorknob. What? I'm sorry, he said simply. For tonight, for all the other nights like this. I'm sorry for the way we treated you, the way we made you feel. You didn't deserve any of it. It wasn't much, but it was something. More than I'd gotten from Linda, certainly. Thank you, I said. That actually means a lot. What you said in there about not leaving, about staying with teaching, did you mean that? I considered his question. I meant it when I said it. But that was before I knew the full extent of what Linda had done. Before I understood how deep the betrayal went. I looked back toward the dining room, where I could still hear Linda crying. I'm not the same person I was 2 hours ago, Tyler. I don't know who I am now or what I'm going to do, but I know I'm not going to let anyone make those decisions for me ever again. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be just fine. Better than fine, actually. We'll see. I walked out into the cool October night, my heels clicking on the stone path to my beat-up Honda Civic. As I drove away from my father's house, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. Same face, same hair, same Target dress. But something in my eyes was different. Harder, more determined. Linda was right about one thing. Money does change people. But not always in the ways you'd expect. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex 20 minutes later, I'd already started making mental lists. Lawyers to call, documents to request, investigators to hire. Linda thought she'd been playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she was about to learn that I'd been studying the board this whole time. If you've ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about your life suddenly shifted, you know how surreal it feels. Like you're walking through a dream or watching someone else's movie. But underneath the surreal feeling was something much more powerful. Anger. Pure, focused, righteous anger at the years that had been stolen from me. The confidence that had been undermined. The sense of self-worth that had been systematically destroyed. Linda had made me feel like the family failure for over a decade. Now it was time for her to learn what failure actually looked like. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Linda's face across that dinner table, heard her voice dismissing my watch as worthless costume jewelry, while knowing it was worth more than most people's houses. I paced my small apartment, really seeing it for the first time in years, taking in the second-hand furniture, the discount store decorations, the careful way I'd arranged everything to hide, how little I actually owned. $47 million. The number felt too big to be real, like something from a fantasy novel. But the watch on my wrist was real enough, its weight somehow different now that I knew what it truly represented. By 5 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and a legal pad, ready to begin the most important research project of my life. If Linda thought she could steal from me for over a decade and get away with it, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. The first call I made was to my school, leaving a voicemail for my principal that I needed to take personal leave for the rest of the week. Family emergency, I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. The second call was to my best friend Jess, a fellow teacher who'd been my rock through more bad family dinners than I cared to count. Maya, it's 6 a.m. Are you okay? Jess, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely insane, but I need you to believe me. 20 minutes later, after I'd explained everything, the watch, the inheritance, Linda's deception, the entire surreal evening, Jess was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Jess, are you there? I'm here. I'm just... Maya, $47 million. I know. It doesn't feel real to me either. But it explains so much, she said slowly. The way Linda always talked to you. The way Tyler and Brianna acted like you were some kind of charity case. God, Maya, they knew. Maybe not the kids, but Linda definitely knew you were worth more than all of them combined. That's what makes it so sick, I said, feeling the anger rise in my chest again. She didn't just steal my money. She stole my dignity, my confidence, my sense of belonging in my own family. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy her, I said simply. Legally, publicly, completely. I'm going to make sure she loses everything. Just like she tried to make me believe I had nothing. Maya. Jess's voice was careful. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But be careful that the revenge doesn't consume you. Don't let this turn you into someone you're not. But that was the thing. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The person I'd been yesterday, the struggling teacher who felt grateful for secondhand furniture and hand-me-down clothes, that person had been built on a foundation of lies. Who was I when that foundation was stripped away? I'll be careful, I told Jess, though we both knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. My first stop was the law office of Morrison, Chong and Associates, a firm I'd found through a combination of online research and referrals from lawyers who specialized in estate fraud. The receptionist tried to tell me that Mr. Morrison was booked solid for the next 3 weeks, But when I mentioned that this was regarding a multi-million-dollar estate fraud case, suddenly he had an opening that afternoon. James Morrison was exactly what I'd expected from a high-end estate attorney. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confident demeanor that comes from years of handling other people's money problems. His office overlooked downtown from the 30th floor, all leather and mahogany and the quiet confidence of serious money. "Ms. Chun," he said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the plush chairs across from his desk. "My assistant mentioned this has to do with estate fraud. Can you give me the basics?" I told him everything, watching his expression grow more interested with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, steepling his fingers as he processed what I told him. "This is a substantial case," he said finally. "If what you're telling me is accurate, we're looking at fraud, theft, possible forgery of legal documents, and conspiracy. The monetary damages alone would be significant, but the punitive damages could be even higher. What are my chances of winning?" "If you can prove that Mrs. Linda Chun," he paused, consulting his notes, "deliberately concealed and misdirected your inheritance, then your chances are excellent. The challenge will be gathering documentation that she may have destroyed or hidden." "What kind of documentation?" "Original trust documents, correspondence with the estate attorneys who handled your mother's affairs, bank records showing the transfer of assets. We'll also need to establish a clear timeline of when she knew about the inheritance and when she took steps to conceal it from you." I thought about the conversation I'd overheard, Linda's admission that she'd told the lawyers I had died with my mother. "I think I can help with that." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Oh." I told him about the conversation I'd overheard, about Linda's confession to destroying documents and lying to estate attorneys. He leaned forward, suddenly much more interested. "Did you record any of this?" "No, but there were witnesses. My father, my step-siblings. They all heard at least part of it." "Your father had no knowledge of the deception?" "I don't think so." He seemed as shocked as I was. I paused, considering. Though I suppose it's possible he knew more than he let on. "I can't be sure of anything anymore." Morrison nodded. "We'll need to interview all of them, get their statements on record. The sooner the better, before anyone has time to coordinate their stories or be influenced by Mrs. Chun." "How long will something like this take?" Estate fraud cases can be complex, especially when they involve this much money and this much time. We're probably looking at months, possibly a year or more. "But Ms. Chun, I want to be very clear about something." He leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "This kind of case tends to destroy families permanently. Once we file suit, once this becomes public record, there's no going back. Your relationship with your stepmother will be over, obviously, but it may also affect your relationships with your father and step-siblings. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Tyler's apology the night before, about the genuine regret I'd seen in his eyes. I thought about Brianna's shock when she realized what her mother had done. I thought about my father, sitting at that table looking older than I'd ever seen him, probably wondering how many other lies he'd been living with. Then I thought about Linda, crying and claiming she'd been protecting me while she planned to steal $47 million. "Mr. Morrison," I said quietly, "they stopped being my family the moment Linda threw my inheritance in the garbage. Everything that happens after this is just making it official." He nodded. "Then let's get started." The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, retainer agreements, and strategy discussions. Morrison's team would begin with a formal demand letter to Linda, requiring her to produce all documents related to my mother's estate. They would also begin the process of subpoenaing records from banks, law firms, and probate courts. "One more thing," Morrison said as I was preparing to leave. "You mentioned that you turned 35 in 4 years, and that's when you would legally inherit everything regardless of Mrs. Chen's interference." "That's right. We're going to want to file for immediate injunctive relief to prevent her from accessing or transferring any assets between now and then. If she realizes she's been caught, she might try to move money offshore or hide it in ways that would make recovery much more difficult." The thought hadn't occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. Linda had been planning this deception for over a decade. She wouldn't give up without a fight. "How quickly can we do that?" "I'll have the paperwork filed by the end of the week. Once the court issues the injunction, She won't be able to touch a penny of your inheritance without facing contempt charges. I left Morrison's office feeling like I was walking on air. For the first time in over 15 years, I had someone on my side who understood exactly what Linda had done and had the power to make her pay for it. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. My next stop was a private investigation firm that Morrison had recommended, specialists in financial fraud and hidden assets. If Linda had been clever enough to steal my inheritance in the first place, she might be clever enough to have hidden backup plans that even Morrison's legal team wouldn't think to look for. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Carol Brennan, listened to my story with the kind of professional detachment that somehow made me feel more confident, not less. "Here's what we're going to do," she said when I finished. "First, we're going to pull every public record associated with your stepmother going back 20 years. Property records, business filings, tax liens, court documents. If she's hidden assets, we'll find them. What about bank records? Those will come through your attorney's subpoena process. But there are other ways to track money movement. Credit reports, loan applications, insurance policies. Rich people who are trying to hide money usually make mistakes, and we're very good at finding those mistakes. How long will this take? For the preliminary work? A week, maybe 2. For the complete financial picture? Probably a month or 2, depending on how complicated she's made things." I was writing another check I couldn't really afford, but that was about to change very soon. And more importantly, every dollar I spent on investigators and attorneys was a dollar that would come back to me 10 times over when I won this case. Because I was going to win. Linda had made one crucial mistake in her elaborate deception. She'd underestimated me. She'd spent so many years treating me like the family disappointment that she'd forgotten I had a brain in my head. She'd gotten so comfortable with her lies that she'd become careless with the truth. That carelessness was about to cost her everything. By the time I got home that evening, my phone was buzzing with missed calls and text messages. Dad had called 3 times. Tyler twice. Even Brianna had sent a text asking if I was okay and whether we could talk. But the most interesting message was from Linda herself. "Maya, honey, please call me. We need to talk about last night. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We can work this out as a family. Please don't do anything rash. I love you. I love you." After 15 years of treating me like an inconvenience, after stealing my inheritance and making me feel worthless, she had the nerve to say she loved me. I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I called Dad. "Maya, thank God. I've been worried sick about you." "I'm fine, Dad. Better than fine, actually. Where are you? What have you been doing today?" "Taking care of business. Dad, we need to talk. Can you come over to my apartment tomorrow evening?" Without Linda. There was a pause. "Maya, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry, Dad. I'm focused. There's a difference. Can you come or not?" Of course. Of course I'll come." "Maya, I want you to know that I had no idea what Linda had done. If I had known, we'll talk about it tomorrow. 7 o'clock. I hung up before he could say anything else. I love my father, but I needed to know exactly where he stood before I could trust him with the details of what I was planning. That night, I finally slept, and I dreamed of Linda's face when she realized that the family disappointment had become her worst nightmare. In my dream, she was crying and begging for forgiveness while I stood over her wearing a dress that cost more than her car, my mother's watch gleaming on my wrist like a badge of victory. When I woke up, I was smiling. If Linda thought last night's dinner had been uncomfortable, she hadn't seen anything yet. The injunction hit Linda like a freight train. Morrison's team had worked with impressive speed, and by Thursday afternoon, Linda received official court documents freezing all assets related to my mother's estate, pending the outcome of our fraud investigation. She couldn't access the trust funds, couldn't sell the Martha's Vineyard property, couldn't touch a single penny of the $47 million she'd been planning to steal. I know this because Tyler called me at 6 a.m. Friday morning, his voice tight with panic. "Maya, what the hell did you do?" "Good morning to you too, Tyler. Mom's been served with some kind of court order. She's completely losing it. She's talking about hiring criminal defense attorneys, about the family being destroyed, about going to prison. What did you do?" I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through my small window. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day. I protected my inheritance from a woman who's been stealing from me for 15 years. What did you think I was going to do? I thought you were going to handle this privately as a family. Tyler, your mother stole $47 million from me. She systematically destroyed my self-esteem and sense of worth for over a decade while planning to commit one of the largest thefts in family history. Did you really think I was going to let her get away with it because we share a dinner table? The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Tyler, I'm here. Maya, I get that you're angry. I really do. But she's my mother. She raised me. She supported me through college. She helped me start my business. I can't just watch her get destroyed. She destroyed herself the moment she decided to steal from me. But what about Dad? What about our family? This is going to tear everyone apart. Your mother tore our family apart 15 years ago when she decided to lie to everyone about my inheritance. I'm just making it visible. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, probably trying to figure out what to say next. Is there anything we can do to fix this? Any way to work this out without destroying everyone? Yes, I said simply. Linda can confess to everything she's done, return every penny she's stolen with interest, and face the consequences of her actions. That's the only way this gets fixed. Maya, Tyler, I have to go. I have a meeting with my attorney in an hour. But I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. Your mother committed serious crimes against me, and she's going to pay for them. That's not negotiable. I hung up before he could respond. The truth was, it was absolutely about revenge, at least partly. But it was also about justice, about making sure that Linda faced real consequences for what she'd done. And if those consequences happened to be satisfyingly severe, well, that was just a bonus. My meeting with Morrison that morning was brief, but productive. The injunction was in place. Linda's attorneys had already reached out requesting a meeting, and the investigation into her financial records was proceeding faster than expected. We've already found evidence of several suspicious transactions over the past 5 years, Morrison told me, sliding a folder across his desk. Money moved into offshore accounts, property purchases made through shell corporations, investment portfolios opened under different names. Your stepmother has been very busy. I flipped through the documents, seeing my life story told in bank statements and legal filings. Here was the record of the Martha's Vineyard house being quietly sold 3 years ago, the proceeds transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands. Here were stock certificates that should have been held in trust for me, instead registered to a corporation that Linda controlled. How much has she stolen so far? It's hard to say definitively until we complete our investigation, but our preliminary estimate is somewhere between $12 and $15 million. The bulk of your inheritance was protected by the trust structure, but she's been systematically looting anything she could access. $15 million. I set the folder down carefully, afraid that if I held it too tightly, I might tear it apart. What happens next? We're filing formal charges with the district attorney's office. This level of theft constitutes grand larceny in the first degree, possibly organized crime charges, depending on how sophisticated her money laundering operation turns out to be. We're also filing civil suits for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion of assets. Prison time. Morrison's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh yes, if we can prove everything we think we can prove, your stepmother is looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. I left Morrison's office feeling lighter than I had in days. Linda wasn't just going to lose the money she'd stolen. She was going to lose her freedom. The woman who'd made me feel like garbage for 15 years was about to learn what real consequences looked like. But the best part was still to come. Dad arrived at my apartment that evening looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made my heart ache despite everything. Maya, he said when I opened the door, we need to talk. Come in, Dad. Can I get you something to drink? He shook his head, settling heavily onto my second-hand couch. Maya, I need to know exactly what you're planning to do. She's not handling this well. I imagine she's not. Having your crimes exposed tends to be stressful. Dad winced at the word crimes, but he didn't argue with it. The court order she received. Maya, it's frozen everything. The house, the investment accounts, even some of our day-to-day banking. Good. That was the point. But I don't understand how this is possible. If what Linda told me was true, if your mother really did die in debt with no assets. I sat down across from him, studying his face. Dad, do you really believe that? Even after everything you heard the other night? He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know what to believe anymore. I've been going through our papers, trying to find any documentation from when your mother died. And Maya, there's nothing. No probate records, no estate documents, no correspondence with attorneys. It's like that entire period of our lives has been erased. Because Linda erased it. She told you herself. She destroyed the documents that would have complicated things. But how could I not have known? How could I have been so blind? I looked at my father, this man I'd loved and admired my entire life, and felt a complicated mix of pity and disappointment. Because you didn't want to know, Dad. Because it was easier to let Linda handle everything after Mom died. Because asking questions would have meant dealing with painful memories. He looked up at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Maya, I am so sorry. I failed you in every possible way. I should have protected you. Should have made sure you got what your mother wanted you to have. Yes, I said simply. You should have. The bluntness of my response seemed to hit him like a physical blow. But I wasn't interested in making this easier for him. He was partially responsible for what had happened to me, even if his crime was negligence rather than malice. What can I do to make this right? You can tell me everything you remember about Mom's death, every conversation you had with Linda about the estate, every decision that was made, every document you signed. I need to know exactly how she managed to steal from me for 15 years without you noticing. For the next 2 hours, we went through it all. Dad's memories were fuzzy. Grief and time had blurred many of the details, but what emerged was a pattern of Linda systematically taking control of everything related to my mother's estate. She'd handled all the legal paperwork, all the correspondence with attorneys, all the financial decisions. She told Dad that she was protecting him from having to deal with painful reminders of his dead wife, and he'd been grateful to let her take care of everything. She was so competent, he said, his voice heavy with regret. So organized. I was barely functional in those first few months after Sarah died, and Linda just stepped in. She handled everything, made all the arrangements, took care of all the details. I thought I was lucky to have found someone so capable. She was capable, I agreed. Capable of planning and executing one of the most elaborate thefts I've ever heard of. Dad flinched again, but he didn't argue. There's something else, he said after a moment. Something I remembered yesterday when I was going through our files. What? About 6 months after Linda and I got married, she inherited some money from a relative. At least, that's what she told me. About $3 million. She said it was from a great-aunt who died without other family. I felt a chill run down my spine. Dad, how much do you want to bet that great-aunt never existed? He met my eyes, and I could see that he'd already reached the same conclusion. The timing would be about right. If she'd started liquidating parts of your mother's estate, she could have used that money to establish herself financially, to make herself seem like a catch worth marrying. And once she was your wife, she'd have access to everything else. Maya, I think she might have married me specifically to get access to your inheritance. The room went very quiet. I'd suspected as much, but hearing Dad say it out loud made it real in a way that was almost breathtaking in its cruelty. She played a very long game, I said finally. Marry the widower, gain his trust, convince him to let her handle all the financial details, then slowly and systematically steal his daughter's inheritance over the course of 15 years, while making sure that daughter felt worthless and inferior, so she'd never question why she wasn't getting what her mother left her. Exactly. Dad stood up abruptly, pacing to my small window. Maya, there's something else. Something I've been afraid to tell you. What now? Tyler and Brianna. Their college tuition, their trust funds, the money I've given them to start their careers. Maya, I think it all came from your inheritance. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. What are you talking about? I've been going through our financial records. The amounts don't add up. I've given my stepchildren hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years for education, business ventures, down payments on houses. But when I look at where that money came from, he turned back to me, his face pale. It didn't come from my salary or my investments. It came from accounts that Linda controlled, accounts that she said were part of her inheritance from that great aunt. Tyler's startup company, Brianna's MBA from Northwestern, the new cars, the expensive apartments, the lifestyle they'd always taken for granted. All of it paid for with my money. Money that Linda had stolen from me and then used to give her biological children every advantage in life, while I struggled to pay my rent. They don't know, Dad said quickly, seeing my expression. Tyler and Brianna have no idea where that money really came from. They think it came from Linda's family wealth and my generosity. But it didn't. It came from me. My inheritance paid for their entire adult lives while I lived paycheck to paycheck. Maya, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to even begin making this right. I stood up, suddenly needing to move, to do something with the rage that was building in my chest like a pressure cooker about to explode. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was systematic, calculated destruction of my life while using my own money to build up the lives of Linda's children. Dad, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to gather every financial document you can find going back 15 years. Bank statements, investment records, tax returns, everything. My attorney is going to need all of it to build our case against Linda. Of course. And Dad, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that Tyler and Brianna might have to give some of that money back. If it can be proven that their education and business ventures were funded with my stolen inheritance, they might be considered unwitting accomplices. Dad's face went white. Maya, they're just kids. They didn't know. They're adults who benefited from stolen money. The law doesn't care whether they knew where it came from. Please, don't destroy their lives over this. They're innocent. I looked at my father, this man who was still trying to protect Linda's children even after learning the full scope of what their mother had done to his biological daughter. Dad, Linda destroyed my life over this. She stole my inheritance, my sense of self-worth, my place in our family. She made me feel like garbage for 15 years while using my money to spoil her children. And you want me to protect them? I want you to be better than she is. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. And maybe they were. Maybe this was my moment to choose who I was going to be going forward. Someone driven by revenge, or someone driven by justice. But as I stood there in my tiny apartment, surrounded by secondhand furniture and discount store decorations, knowing that Tyler and Brianna had lived in luxury funded by my stolen money, while I worried about making ends meet, I realized that sometimes revenge and justice look exactly the same. I'll try to be fair, Dad. But fair doesn't mean they get to keep money that was stolen from me, even if they didn't know it was stolen. And it definitely doesn't mean Linda gets away with what she's done. Dad nodded slowly. I understand. Maya, I want you to know that I'm going to support you through this. Whatever you need, whatever it takes to make this right, I'm on your side. Even if it means Linda goes to prison. He was quiet for a long moment. Especially if it means Linda goes to prison. What she did to you, what she did to our family, it's unforgivable. After Dad left, I called Morrison to update him on what I'd learned. The revelation about Tyler and Brianna's education and business ventures being funded with stolen money added another layer to our case. And the evidence of Linda's inheritance from a non-existent great-aunt would help establish the timeline and methods of her theft. This is turning into one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've ever seen, Morrison told me. Your stepmother didn't just steal from you. She built an entire life based on your stolen inheritance. The criminal charges are going to be extensive. How extensive? We're looking at multiple counts of grand larceny, fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and possibly racketeering if we can prove that this was an organized criminal enterprise rather than just opportunistic theft. And prison time. With this much money involved and this level of sophistication, she's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum, possibly life if the federal prosecutors decide to make an example of her. Life in prison. Linda, who had spent 15 years making me feel small and worthless, might spend the rest of her life in a cell thinking about what she'd stolen from me. If you've ever imagined your worst enemy facing ultimate consequences for their actions, you understand the feeling that washed over me in that moment. It wasn't just satisfaction, it was a sense of cosmic justice being served. Linda had tried to erase me from my own life, and now she was about to be erased from hers. But the sweetest revenge was still to come. Because tomorrow, Linda was going to learn that I wasn't just taking back my inheritance. I was taking everything else too. Saturday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. I was still in bed, enjoying the first peaceful sleep I'd had in days, when my phone rang at 8 a.m. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. Miss Chun, this is Detective Sarah Walsh with the Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with you about Linda Chun and the fraud case you filed. I sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. Of course. What can I tell you? Actually, I'm calling because there's something you need to know. Your case has opened up a much larger investigation. We've been tracking Mrs. Chun for over 2 years as part of a federal task force on inheritance fraud, and your case provides the missing pieces we've been looking for. I'm sorry, what? Ms. Chun, your stepmother isn't just a thief. She's part of an organized network that specializes in marrying into wealthy families and systematically looting their estates. You're not her first victim. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to process what Detective Walsh was telling me. How many others? So far, we've identified at least 4 other cases with similar patterns. Wealthy widowers, mysterious inheritances from relatives that never existed, missing estate documentation, and systematic theft of assets meant for the deceased spouse's children. For other families, for other people like me, made to feel worthless while their birthright was stolen. For other Linda Chens, somewhere out there, probably still wondering why they never felt good enough for their own families. Ms. Chun, are you still there? I'm here. This is a lot to take in. I understand, but here's why I'm calling. We need you to help us build the federal case against your stepmother and her associates. With your cooperation, we can shut down their entire operation and potentially recover millions of dollars for multiple victims. What do you need me to do? Can you come in Monday morning? There are some people you need to meet, and we have a proposal for you that I think you'll find very interesting. After I hung up, I sat in my bed for a long time, staring at the wall and trying to wrap my head around what I'd just learned. Linda wasn't just a greedy stepmother who'd stolen from me. She was a professional criminal who'd made a career out of destroying families like mine. But instead of making me feel worse, this revelation filled me with a cold, focused determination. Linda hadn't just hurt me. She'd hurt other people, other families. And now I had the chance to make sure she never hurt anyone else again. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. This time it was Brianna, and she was crying. Maya, please, you have to help us. Brianna? What's wrong? It's Mom. She's gone. She left in the middle of the night. Dad found a note this morning saying she had to go away for a while, that she was sorry for everything, and that she'd try to make things right. Linda was running. Of course she was running. The injunction had frozen her access to most of the stolen money, but she'd probably hidden emergency funds somewhere that we hadn't found yet. Brianna, where's Dad? He's with the lawyers. They're trying to figure out what this means for the court case, for the house, for everything. Maya, I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening anymore. Where are you? At Tyler's apartment. We're both here, trying to figure out what to do. Give me the address. I'm coming over. I threw on clothes and drove across town to Tyler's upscale apartment complex, my mind racing. Linda running actually made things easier in some ways. It was essentially an admission of guilt, and it meant she wouldn't be around to interfere with the investigation. But it also meant she might be trying to access hidden funds or disappear entirely. Tyler answered the door looking like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, Brianna was curled up on his expensive couch, tissue box in her lap, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Maya, Tyler said, relief evident in his voice. Thank God you came. I sat down across from them, studying their faces. These were the people who'd spent years making me feel inferior, who'd lived lavish lifestyles funded by my stolen inheritance. But looking at them now, shell-shocked and scared, I couldn't summon the anger I'd expected to feel. "Tell me everything," I said. They told me about the note Linda had left, about the early morning phone calls from lawyers and accountants, about the growing realization that their entire lives had been built on lies and stolen money. "Maya," Brianna said through her tears, "Dad told us about the money, about how Mom used your inheritance to pay for our college, our cars, everything. We didn't know. I swear we didn't know." "I know," I said simply. "I believe you." Tyler leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "What happens to us now? I mean, legally? Are we going to have to give back money we didn't know was stolen?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been wrestling with since Dad had revealed the truth about their funding. "I don't know yet. That's something the lawyers and the courts will have to figure out." "But Tyler, Brianna, I want you to understand something. This isn't about punishing you. This is about getting back what was stolen from me. But our businesses, our houses, everything we've built." Tyler's voice trailed off. "Was built with my money," I said quietly. "I'm not saying that to hurt you, but it's the truth. The question is what we do about it going forward." Brianna looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Maya, we're sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but we're so sorry for the way we treated you, for the things we said, for making you feel like you didn't belong." "We were raised to think we were better than you," Tyler added. "Mom always made comments about your choices, your clothes, your career. We thought it was just normal sibling stuff. But now you realize she was systematically undermining me to hide her own crimes." "Yeah," Tyler said quietly. "That's exactly what she was doing." We sat in silence for a moment, three people who'd shared a family table for 15 years, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. "There's something else," I said finally. "Something you both need to know. The police called me this morning. Linda isn't just a thief. She's part of an organized network that targets wealthy families. There are other victims, other families she's destroyed." The color drained from both their faces. "Other families?" Brianna whispered. "At least for that they know about. Linda is a professional criminal who makes a living marrying into wealthy families and stealing from them." Tyler put his head in his hands. "Jesus, our mother is a career criminal." "Which means," I continued, "that the federal government is now involved. This isn't just about my inheritance anymore. This is about shutting down a criminal organization." I told them about my conversation with Detective Walsh, about the federal investigation, about the likelihood that Linda would face decades in prison if she was caught. "What if she doesn't get caught?" Brianna asked. "What if she just disappears forever? Then she spends the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, never able to use her real name, never able to contact either of you again. Is that really better than prison?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "Maya, what do you need from us? How can we help you make this right?" "I need you to tell the truth. To the police, to the courts, to anyone who asks. I need you to help them understand exactly what Linda did and how she did it. And I need you to accept that there are going to be financial consequences for both of you." "What kind of consequences?" "You might have to pay back some of the money that came from my inheritance. Your businesses might be considered assets derived from criminal activity. I don't know all the details yet, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that your financial lives are about to get very complicated." Brianna started crying again, but Tyler nodded grimly. "Whatever it takes. Maya, we want to make this right. We want to help you get back everything she stole from you, even if it means you lose everything in the process." Tyler looked around his expensive apartment, probably thinking about his startup company, his Tesla, his comfortable lifestyle. Then he looked back at me. "Maya, everything I have was bought with money stolen from you. If making things right means I have to start over, then that's what I'll do." Brianna wiped her eyes and nodded. "Me too. I'd rather lose everything and know I'm doing the right thing than keep living a lie." For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt something that might have been genuine affection for my step-siblings. They weren't the entitled, condescending people I'd thought they were. They were just kids who'd been manipulated by their mother as much as I had, albeit in very different ways. There's something else, I said. Something I think you both deserve to know before we go any further. What? When this is all over, when I get my inheritance back, I'm going to be very wealthy. Wealthier than any of us imagined. They waited for me to continue. And I've been thinking about what I want to do with that wealth. About what kind of person I want to be going forward. I stood up and walked to Tyler's window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Linda was probably panicking, trying to figure out how to salvage her criminal empire. Somewhere out there, other families were living lives built on stolen money, just like we had been. I can't give you back your innocence, I said, turning back to face them. I can't undo the years of living on stolen money, or the knowledge that your mother is a criminal. But I can choose how to handle the financial consequences. Maya, what are you saying? I'm saying that when this is over, we're going to sit down and figure out a fair way to handle the money you received. Not because the courts force us to, but because it's the right thing to do. And I'm saying that I don't want Linda's crimes to destroy any more lives than they already have. Tyler stared at me for a long moment. You're going to help us? I'm going to be fair to you. There's a difference. Even after everything we did to you, everything we said, Tyler, you were kids manipulated by a criminal mastermind who also happened to be your mother. I'm not going to punish you for that. Brianna stood up and, before I could react, wrapped me in a fierce hug. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being better than we deserved. As I drove home that afternoon, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in me. The rage that had been driving me for the past week was still there, but it was tempered now by something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. Linda had hurt all of us, just in different ways. But that understanding didn't change what I was planning to do to her. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. Linda might have thought that running away would save her, but she just made the biggest mistake of her criminal career. Because now it wasn't just about my stolen inheritance. Now it was about justice for every family she'd destroyed, every life she'd ruined, every person she'd made feel worthless while she stole their birthright. Linda had spent 15 years teaching me that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't matter, that I was somehow less than everyone else. She was about to learn just how wrong she'd been. The federal building downtown was exactly what you'd expect, all concrete and glass, with the kind of imposing architecture designed to make you feel small and insignificant. But as I walked through the metal detectors Monday morning, briefcase in hand and my mother's watch gleaming on my wrist, I felt anything but small. Detective Walsh met me in the lobby, a tall woman with prematurely gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Miss Chin, I'm Sarah Walsh. Thank you for coming in. She led me through a maze of corridors to a conference room where 3 other people were waiting. A federal prosecutor named James Riley, a financial crime specialist named Dr. Elizabeth Huang, and most surprisingly, a woman about my age who introduced herself as Jennifer Morrison. Not related to your attorney, she clarified with a slight smile. Different Morrison entirely. I'm here because I'm one of the other victims. I stared at her, this woman who looked like she could have been my sister. Similar age, similar build, similar expression of barely controlled anger mixed with determination. Linda targeted your family too? Linda Berkshire in my case, though I'm starting to think neither of us knows her real name. Jennifer's smile turned bitter. She married my father 3 years after my mother died, convinced him to let her handle all the estate paperwork, and then systematically stole everything my mother left me. Sound familiar? It sounded exactly familiar. Too familiar. Detective Walsh gestured for us to sit around the conference table. Ms. Chun, meet victim number 2. Jennifer's case broke open our investigation into what we're calling the Black Widow Network, a group of women who specialize in marrying wealthy widowers and stealing inheritances meant for their children. Dr. Huang opened a thick folder and spread photographs across the table. We've identified 7 women working together in this network over the past 15 years. They share resources, information, and methods. When one of them identifies a target, the others help with background research, document forgery, and money laundering. I studied the photographs. Linda's face stared back at me from one of them, but she looked different, younger, with different hair, different clothes. Next to her photo were 6 other women, all attractive, all professional looking, all appearing to be in their 40s or 50s. How does it work? I asked. Prosecutor Riley took over. They target recently widowed men with substantial assets and young children who stand to inherit. They spend months or sometimes years researching their targets, learning about the family dynamics, the deceased spouse's estate, the children's personalities, and vulnerabilities. Then they engineer a meeting, Detective Walsh continued, usually through mutual friends, charity events, or professional connections. They present themselves as successful, independent women who are interested in the man for himself, not his money. They're patient, Jennifer added bitterly. My stepmother, if that's even what I should call her, dated my father for 2 years before they got married. She was so understanding about his grief, so supportive of his need to take things slowly. During the courtship period, Dr. Huang explained, they gathered detailed intelligence about the family's finances, the deceased spouse's estate planning, and any existing inheritance arrangements. By the time they marry into the family, they know exactly what they're stealing and how to hide it. I thought about Linda's gradual takeover of our family's financial matters, how she positioned herself as the competent organizer who was protecting Dad from painful reminders of his dead wife. Once they're married and have legal access to family financial information, they begin the systematic theft, Riley continued. They destroy or alter estate documents, lie to attorneys and financial institutions, and slowly liquidate assets that should have been held in trust. They also work to undermine the legitimate heirs, Detective Walsh added, making them feel inferior, questioning their life choices, ensuring they never develop the confidence or curiosity to ask hard questions about their inheritance. And if anyone gets suspicious, Jennifer said, they have backup plans. Hidden accounts, false identities, exit strategies. My stepmother disappeared 18 months ago when I started asking questions about my mother's estate. We haven't seen her since. I looked around the table at these law enforcement professionals who'd been tracking Linda and her associates for years, building cases against women who'd made a profession out of destroying families. What do you need from me? I asked. We need you to help us catch her, Detective Walsh said simply. Your stepmother made a mistake by running instead of trying to fight the charges. She's scared, she's desperate, and desperate people make errors in judgment. What kind of errors? Prosecutor Riley smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. The kind that let us trace her movements, identify her associates, and ultimately bring down her entire network. Over the next 2 hours, they laid out their plan. Linda's disappearance had triggered a massive federal investigation involving the FBI, IRS, Treasury Department, and Interpol. They were tracking her financial movements, monitoring her known associates, and tracing the web of shell companies and offshore accounts she'd used to hide stolen assets. But we need more than just financial evidence, Dr. Huang explained. We need someone who can testify to her methods, her manipulation tactics, her long-term planning. Someone who lived with her lies for years and can help a jury understand the psychological dimension of what she did. You want me to testify against her? We want you to help us make sure she never hurts another family, Detective Walsh corrected. Ms. Chen, your case is the most comprehensive we've seen. The documentation you've provided, combined with your father's cooperation and the evidence we've gathered independently, gives us everything we need to not only convict Linda, but to shut down her entire network. How many other victims are there? That we know of, at least 12 families over 15 years. But we think there are more cases where the victims never realized they were being robbed, or where the thieves were successful enough that no one ever questioned the missing inheritances. 12 families, 12 people like me, made to feel worthless while their birthright was stolen. 12 sets of parents, siblings, children whose lives had been systematically destroyed by professional criminals. What happens to Linda if you catch her? Riley's expression was grim. With the evidence we have, and with your testimony, she's looking at life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The RICO charges alone carry a minimum sentence of 20 years, and we're talking about multiple counts of fraud, theft, money laundering, and conspiracy. And her associates? Same thing. We're going to roll up the entire network, recover as much stolen money as possible, and make sure these women never have the opportunity to hurt another family. Jennifer leaned forward, her eyes intense. Maya, I know this is overwhelming. I know you probably just want your inheritance back and to move on with your life. But these women destroyed my family. They convinced my father that I was ungrateful and selfish for asking questions about my inheritance. I haven't spoken to him in 2 years because he still believes their lies about me. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be sorry. Help me make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. I looked around the table again, at these people who'd dedicated their careers to fighting financial crimes, at Jennifer who'd lost her relationship with her father along with her inheritance, at the photographs of 7 women who'd made a living destroying families like mine. What do you need me to do? I asked again. First, we need you to be prepared for a long legal process, Detective Walsh said. Federal cases take time, sometimes years. You'll need to be patient while we build the strongest possible case against not just Linda, but her entire network. Second, Riley added, we need you to be prepared for the possibility that Linda might try to contact you. If she does, we need to know immediately. You think she'll reach out to me? She might. She's desperate. She's cut off from most of her resources, and she might try to manipulate you into dropping the charges or providing her with financial assistance. Dr. Huang handed me a small electronic device. This is a recording device. If Linda contacts you, try to keep her on the phone or in person as long as possible while this records the conversation. Get her to admit to what she's done. Get her to implicate her associates. Get her to reveal where she's hidden assets. You want me to trap her? We want you to help her trap herself, Detective Walsh corrected. Maya, Linda spent 15 years manipulating and lying to you. She made you feel worthless while she stole your future. Don't you think it's time for her to face consequences for what she's done? I thought about the years of family dinners where I'd felt inadequate, the struggling to make ends meet while Linda lived in luxury funded by my stolen inheritance, the systematic destruction of my self-worth while she planned to steal $47 million from me. Yes, I said simply. I think it's time. As I left the federal building 3 hours later, I felt like I was walking into a new life. Not just because of the money I'd eventually recover, but because I was no longer the victim in this story. I was an active participant in bringing justice to Linda and her associates. Linda had spent 15 years teaching me that I was powerless, that I didn't matter, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention or affection the family threw my way. She was about to learn that she'd created her own worst enemy. If you've ever had the chance to turn the tables on someone who's hurt you, to go from victim to victor in the most satisfying possible way, you understand the feeling that was building in my chest as I walked to my car. It wasn't just anticipation, it was certainty. Linda had made one fatal error in her 15-year campaign against me. She'd underestimated who I really was. She'd confused kindness with weakness, patience with stupidity, humility with inferiority. Now she was going to learn the difference. And when she did, it was going to destroy her completely. 3 weeks later, Linda made her move. I was grading papers in my apartment on a Thursday evening when my phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but something made me answer it anyway. Maya? Sweetheart, it's me. Linda's voice, smaller and more fragile than I'd ever heard it, but definitely her. I felt my pulse spike as I reached for the recording device Detective Walsh had given me, fumbling to turn it on while keeping my voice steady. Linda, where are you? I can't tell you that, honey, but I needed to hear your voice. Needed to try to explain. Explain what? How you stole $47 million from me. How you made me feel worthless for 15 years while you lived off my inheritance. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then the sound of Linda, crying. Maya, you have to understand, I never meant for it to go this far. I was trying to protect you. By stealing from me? By protecting you from what that money would have done to you. Maya, I've seen what sudden wealth does to people. It ruins them, changes them, destroys their relationships and their sense of self. You were so pure, so good, so focused on things that actually mattered. I couldn't bear to watch that money corrupt you. The same lies she told Dad, the same justification she'd used to rationalize 15 years of theft and manipulation. But now I could hear the desperation underneath the words, the fear of someone who knew their world was crashing down around them. So you decided to steal it for yourself instead. I decided to make sure it was used responsibly. Maya, do you have any idea how much good that money has done? Tyler's company employs 43 people. Brianna's working for a nonprofit that helps disadvantaged children get access to quality education. Your father and I have donated hundreds of thousands to charity. With my money. With money that would have been wasted if you'd gotten it at 21. Maya, please, you have to listen to me. The federal agents, the prosecutors, they don't understand the full situation. They're making me out to be some kind of monster, but I'm not. I'm just a woman who made some difficult decisions to protect the people she loved. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Even now, even caught red-handed, Linda was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to make herself the victim in this story. Linda, where's the money? The real money, not just what the government has frozen. What money? Maya, everything is tied up in the investigation. Don't lie to me anymore. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the property you've bought under false names. The FBI knows too. Where is it? The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Maya, I need your help. My help. The accounts, some of them are in the Cayman Islands, some in Switzerland. But I can't access them while the investigation is ongoing. All my assets are frozen. I can't use credit cards. I can't even rent a hotel room under my real name. Good. Maya, please. I'm your stepmother. We're family. I know I made mistakes, but I can make this right. If you could lend me some money, just enough to get back on my feet, I promise I'll pay you back everything with interest. The sheer, breathtaking gall of it left me speechless for a moment. Linda had stolen $47 million from me, destroyed my sense of self-worth for 15 years, and now she was asking me to lend her money to help her escape justice. How much? I asked, curious to see how deep her desperation ran. Not much. Maybe 50,000? I know it's a lot for someone on a teacher's salary. But Maya, if they catch me, if I go to prison, it won't help anyone. Your inheritance will be tied up in legal proceedings for years, maybe decades. But if I can just disappear quietly, start over somewhere, I can make sure you get your money back without all the publicity and legal complications. $50,000. To Linda, trapped and desperate, that probably seemed like a fortune. She had no idea that I'd already spoken to Morrison about accessing some of my inheritance early to pay legal expenses, or that I could write a check for $50,000 without blinking. Linda, you're asking me to help you escape from the consequences of stealing from me. I'm asking you to help me make things right the easy way instead of the hard way. And if I don't help you? The pause was longer this time, and when Linda spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone was the pleading, manipulative tone, replaced by something colder and more calculating. Maya, you don't want this to go to trial. You don't want your family's business spread across every newspaper and gossip blog in the country. Think about what this will do to your father, to Tyler and Brianna. Think about what it will do to you. What do you mean? I mean that if this goes to trial, everything comes out. Every family dinner where you complained about your life, every time you asked your father for money, every moment when you seemed jealous of Tyler and Brianna's success. The defense attorneys will paint you as a bitter, entitled woman who's fabricating claims about stolen inheritance to get revenge on a stepmother who never accepted you. My blood went cold. Even now, even caught and desperate, Linda was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to make me doubt myself and my worth. And she continued, her voice gaining confidence as she warmed to her theme. Think about what a long, public trial will do to your precious students and their families. Think about how it will look when they find out their trusted teacher comes from a family of thieves and liars. Think about your career, your reputation, your simple little life that you claim to love so much. Are you threatening me, Linda? I'm trying to protect you, Maya, just like I always have. Just like I did when I kept that inheritance away from you before you were mature enough to handle it responsibly. I'm 31 years old, and look how you're handling this situation. You've destroyed our family, turned your father against me, corrupted Tyler and Brianna with lies and accusations. Is this the mature, responsible behavior of someone who should be trusted with $47 million? The manipulation was so blatant, so perfectly crafted, that I almost admired it. Linda knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to make me question my own judgment and worth. She'd had 15 years to perfect these techniques, after all. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She thought I was still the insecure, self-doubting woman she'd spent so long creating. She had no idea who I'd become over the past month. Linda, I said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth for once in your life. Of course, sweetheart. Anything. How many other families have you done this to? The silence was deafening. Maya, I don't know what you mean. I've met Jennifer Morrison, Linda. Or should I say, I've met Jennifer Morrison, who was robbed by Linda Berkshire. How many other names do you use? How many other families have you destroyed? I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow on the other end of the line. Maya, you don't understand. I understand that you're a career criminal who spent the last 15 years destroying families and stealing inheritances. I understand that you're part of an organized network of women who make a living marrying widowers and robbing their children. I understand that you've probably stolen millions of dollars from dozens of people over the years. That's not. Maya, you're confused. Someone has been filling your head with lies. The FBI has been filling my head with facts, Linda. They've shown me photographs of you with 6 other women who do exactly what you do. They've traced money you've stolen from at least 12 families. They've connected you to a network of professional inheritance thieves who've been operating for over 15 years. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, in a voice so quiet I could barely hear it, Maya, please, I'm begging you. If you ever felt any love for me, any gratitude for the years I spent raising you, helping your father through his grief, trying to hold our family together, please don't do this to me. And there it was, the final manipulation, the last desperate attempt to make me responsible for her choices, to make me feel guilty for seeking justice for what she'd done to me and to other families. Linda, I said, and my voice was steady and calm, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen next. Maya, you're going to hang up this phone and disappear back into whatever hole you're hiding in. You're going to spend the next few weeks or months looking over your shoulder, wondering if every knock on the door is the FBI coming to arrest you. Please. And eventually, they're going to catch you. They're going to drag you back here in handcuffs, and you're going to stand trial for everything you've done. Not just to me, but to Jennifer Morrison and all the other families you've destroyed. I could hear her crying now, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. And when you're convicted, when you're sentenced to spend the rest of your life in federal prison, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that you had the chance to face the consequences of your actions with whatever dignity you had left, and instead you chose to try to manipulate and threaten the woman whose life you'd already destroyed. Maya, I love you. No, Linda, you love my inheritance. You love the lifestyle my stolen money provided. You love the sense of power you got from making me feel worthless while you lived like a queen on what should have been mine. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights while Linda sobbed on the other end of the line. But most of all, I continued, I want you to remember that you created your own destruction. You spent 15 years teaching me that I didn't matter, that I wasn't good enough, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection or attention I received. You taught me to be patient, to be observant, to be strategic. Maya, and now I'm going to use everything you taught me to make sure you pay for every crime you've committed, every life you've ruined, every family you've destroyed. You wanted me to learn how to be ruthless? Congratulations, Linda. You succeeded. I hung up the phone and immediately called Detective Walsh to report the contact. Within hours, the FBI had traced the call to a motel outside Phoenix, but by the time they got there, Linda was gone. It didn't matter. She'd made her first mistake by running, and she'd made her second mistake by contacting me. Now they had her voice on recording, admitting to theft, confessing to manipulation, revealing the depth of her desperation. But more than that, I had the satisfaction of knowing that Linda finally understood who she was dealing with. For 15 years, she'd seen me as weak, gullible, someone to be pitted and dismissed. Now she knew the truth. I wasn't the family disappointment she'd spent so long creating. I wasn't the broken, insecure woman she tried to turn me into. I was her worst nightmare. Someone who knew exactly what she'd done, who had the resources to make her pay for it, and who was patient enough to see justice served no matter how long it took. Linda had taught me to be strategic, to be observant, to think several steps ahead. Now she was going to learn just how good a student I'd been. If you ever had the perfect opportunity to show someone who hurt you exactly what they've created, you know the feeling I had as I hung up that phone. It wasn't just satisfaction, it was completion. The circle was closing. The student had become the master, and the woman who'd spent 15 years making me feel powerless was about to learn what real powerlessness looked like. Linda was running out of options, running out of money, running out of time. But I was just getting started.